Hello, I'm Shane Hendren with Rio Grande, and in this video I'm going to teach you how to make these turquoise and sterling silver hoop earrings. If you want to see how, keep watching. So a lot of times my projects start out with the stones, and what I'll do oftentimes is I'll make bezels for a lot of stones at once, and then I'll figure out how to incorporate the stone into the piece. But here I'm making up all the bezels as well as the twisted wire that goes around the bezels in preparation for the earrings that I'm going to be making. I like to use a heavy gauge twisted wire around the outside of my bezels because it provides additional protection to the stone, as well as it makes it look good. It frames the stone, if you will. And then I'll solder these onto the back plates, as you'll see, to create the entire setting that I'm going to use in the earring. I put all of my solder on the inside of the bezel cup, and for the most part what I try to do is heat it up and draw it out, and then I'll use wire solder to add as needed to make sure that everything is soldered down. With this type of setting, these earrings, I want to make sure everything is secure. So once I've soldered on the bezels and the twisted wire and everything, I cut away the excess back plate. On these earrings I used 22 gauge sterling silver as the backer. Because the stones are rather large, I want to make sure that they're well supported. So here I'm filing the edges down, getting the saw marks filed off, and getting the shape right. For me, this is easiest done with a file. So with all the settings done, now I'm cutting out the hoops that are going to dangle from the bottoms of the settings, cutting them out of 22 gauge sterling silver. And what you see there is I have templates, and I've scribed a pattern onto the sheet, and then I just cut to the line, if you will. I chose 22 gauge because it's thick enough where I can make deep engravings, but it's going to be light enough that it's going to have very good wearability. Once I have all the hoops cut out and shaped and everything, then I'll connect them to the settings with a jump ring, and at the same time I'm putting on the post on the back of the setting. I do this through a technique called pick soldering. I use my tungsten pick to pick up the solder and place it exactly where I want it, so I don't run into issues of the solder running or anything. I really love these EV silicone polishing wheels. I use them a lot. They're great for what I'm doing here is removing the fire scale and the excess solder and doing a little shaping, but they're just fantastic. So now I'm buffing. I'm using Luxie Black on a yellow treated buff for my pre-polished scratch removal step. This is actually a pretty shiny finish. I like the Luxie because it's water-based and it's easy to clean up. And then I finish it off with a Luxie White on a white muslin buff, and that gives me a real nice shine and looks good. So this is the back of the earring, and what I'm doing is I'm putting a little saying on it. This one says create your own sunshine, because I made 3 different sets of earrings. This one has a citrine stone in it, and I thought that little saying was cool. For my collectors that make custom orders, I oftentimes put very personalized things on the back of their jewelry for them. Now we're starting to get down and get groovy. This is called a wriggle cut. I'm wriggling my little border all the way around, and it's going to start coming to life now. This is just another view of me wriggling, but it shows you how much material I'm removing as I go around there and create that wriggle border on these hoops. It really is an amazing process, especially when you see it from these angles. So this is what I'm talking about when I say this is where the magic happens. I either do my layouts of my scrolls with Sharpie, or I use a scribe, which is what you see here in this picture. And as you go along and watch this this whole series, you're going to see that this hoop on this earring goes from a flat, shiny piece of silver to this ornate, beautiful thing. I mean, every single line that I cut in the silver gives it more depth, gives it, contrast. It just really, really brings it to life. I'm using a couple of different gravers here. I'm using a C-Max 120 to do most of my removal cuts and everything. And then I'm using an Anglette to do my shading. All of it comes together. If you've never engraved, I recommend that you lay out all of your different elements and everything. Typically, for the most part, I just lay out the scrolls so that I have the general backbone, the shape of it, and then I just fill it in as I go. I've drawn my whole life, and I think because I've drawn for so long, it gives me a huge advantage when it comes to engraving. So if you're considering engraving, I recommend you get a pen and pencil and paper and start there, because if you can't draw it, you can't cut it. Now we're on the home stretch. We're setting the stones. I'll use a pusher to push the metal over against the stone, and then a lot of times I'll use a bezel rocker to try to even that up, or in this case I used a burnisher to really get the metal as close and as tight to the stone as I could before I start using the hammer tip, because you don't want to touch the stone with the hammer tip. So by having all that metal pushed over, it reduces the chances of that happening, because if you hit that stone wrong, you could crack it and break it. This is the final polish, and this is how I typically do it. I use the silicone polishing wheels as well as the radial bristle discs. You saw on one of those earring backs it was covered with black ink, and that was because I wanted that black ink to fill those voids so that it would be easier to read the area that was engraved away. But then on the fronts, they're done in what's called a bright cut style, so I don't want to darken them. I want them to shine and pop. I don't put any ink on those. But I will give you a word of warning. Not all stones can handle those radial bristle discs or the silicone wheels touching them. They can get scratched or damaged. So beware of that. You got to be careful when you're working around the stones so that you don't inadvertently damage them. But this final polishing is it's what really just makes it all worth it. It's just so cool. Well, there you go. There's the final product. I hope you found this video informative and inspirational. If you have any questions, please contact us. Thank you.